For the last 4 years, I've dreaded Christmas. That probably sounds terrible, doesn't it? A mother, a grandmother, dreading the one time of year the whole family is supposed to be together. It wasn't the work. It was never the work. It wasn't the cooking, the cleaning, or the endless decorating. It was my son's wife, Judith. For 4 years straight, she has walked into my home and, in her quiet, smiling way, made one passive-aggressive insult after another. All through dinner. All through the opening of the presents. And for 4 years, I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I did what most of us do. I bit my tongue. I kept the peace. But this last Christmas, this 4th year, I was just so tired of biting my tongue. And I finally did something about it. My name is Raina Alexander. I'm 68 years old. And I live in Carmichael, in the same house I've been in for over 40 years. My late husband, Harold, God rest his soul, he always had a nickname for me. He'd grab my hand when the house was full of noise and grandkids and say, "Raina, you're the family glue. You're the one who holds us all together." And I was. I loved being that person. I took pride in it. This house has always been the hub. Every birthday, every Thanksgiving, and especially every Christmas. When Harold was alive, this place was just magic. He'd have his favorite Bing Crosby carols playing on the old record player, the one that still has that little crackle. The kids, Jonathan and his sister, would be sneaking cookies from the cooling rack, leaving a little trail of crumbs. It was just warm. It was safe. After Harold passed 10 years ago, I made a promise to myself. I would keep it all going. I would be the matriarch. It wasn't even a choice. It's just who I am. It's what we do, isn't it? We're the keepers of the memories. We keep the family stories alive. I'm the one who still uses my late mother's recipe for the roast turkey, the one that uses so much butter. I'm the one who still puts up the same old mismatched ornaments that my children made in grade school, the little angels made of clothespins, and the reindeer with the googly eyes falling off. They're not fancy, but they're our history. I'm the one who remembers that my grandson is allergic to walnuts. I'm the one who knits those warm, practical sweaters. I'm the one who makes sure everyone has their favorite pie, pumpkin for Jonathan, apple for my daughter, pecan for the grandkids. It's work, yes, but it's good work. It's the work of a family. It's the work of a mother. And for decades, I was so proud of it. But that pride, it's been getting harder to hold on to. That role I loved so much. It started to feel heavy. This is the part that's hard to admit. This family glue role. It started to feel like I was just the one getting stepped on. The one holding things together while everyone else just took it for granted. And it all really started when my son, Jonathan, married Judith. The first year, I told myself I was imagining it. She's just nervous, I'd say. She's just different. The second year, I told myself she just had high standards. The third year, I just hurt. I spent the whole day just trying to avoid her. And now, this 4th Christmas was approaching. I found myself standing in my kitchen just a few days before they were all set to arrive. I was looking at the box of my mother's antique dessert plates, the ones with the little hand-painted gold rims. And I just had this feeling, a cold knot, right in the pit of my stomach. I was so tired. I was tired of the forced smiles. I was tired of the little digs that no one else seemed to notice. But most of all, I was tired of watching my own son, my sweet boy Jonathan, just sit there and let it all happen. I took a deep breath and told myself, this year will be different. Maybe she's matured. Maybe I can be better. Maybe we can just have one nice Christmas. I was desperate for that. I just wanted my magical, warm Christmas back. I had no idea that it would be different, but not in the way I expected. It would be the year I finally stopped being the glue and started being, well, me. To understand what happened, you have to understand the two of them. My son, Jonathan, and his wife, Judith. My son. Jonathan is a good man. He truly is. He's in his 40s. He's a wonderful father to my 2 grandchildren, and he has a kind heart. He's the kind of man who'd stop to help someone change a tire in the rain. I raised him that way. But he has one quality, one single trait that is at the root of this entire mess. Jonathan hates conflict. I don't mean he just dislikes it. I mean he is actively terrified of it. He's a peacemaker, but to a fault. He's the person who will do anything, say anything, or not say anything just to stop an argument from starting. He wants everyone to be happy all at the same time, which is a lovely idea, but it's not how life works. He'd rather agree to something he hates than have an uncomfortable conversation. And in the battle between his mother and his wife, he just disappears. He just wants the 2 most important women in his life to get along. He doesn't seem to understand that his refusal to get involved is, in itself, a choice. I know he loves me. I have to hold on to that. But his fear of confrontation, it's just stronger than his need to defend me. And he is absolutely 100% terrified of his wife. And then there's Judith. Judith is different. She's sharp, she's in her late 30s, and she always looks perfect, like she just stepped out of one of those modern furniture catalogs. Her house is all white and gray and glass. My house, as you know, is all quilts and oak and memories. Her world is curated. My world is lived in. And I truly believe she sees everything I do not as a tradition, but as a personal criticism of her. She's not a monster. I don't think she wakes up in the morning thinking, how can I be cruel to Raina today? I think she's just deeply insecure. When I make my mother's turkey recipe, she doesn't just see a turkey. She sees me implying that her way of cooking, her healthy way, is wrong. When I knit sweaters for the grandkids, she doesn't see a gift of love. She sees me implying that the expensive, store-bought clothes she buys aren't thoughtful enough. And because she's not brave enough to say, Raina, it hurts my feelings when you do that, she attacks. But not directly. Oh no, that would be a fight. And that would force Jonathan to get involved. Judith is the queen of the passive-aggressive insult. She's a master of it. It's the little dig wrapped in a smile. It's the helpful suggestion that's really a jab. It's the comment that is just polite enough that if I were to call her on it, I would look like the crazy one. I would be the one making a fuss. She makes it all sound so reasonable, so modern, so practical. But the message is always crystal clear. You are old. You are outdated. Your way is wrong. My way is right. And the 2 of them together, it's this perfect, awful, toxic system. Judith knows she can say anything she wants. She knows she can land these little verbal punches, one after another, because she knows with absolute certainty that Jonathan will not stop her. So she gets to be the one in charge. She gets to be the new matriarch of her little family by slowly, year after year, chipping away at the old one. Me. And Jonathan, my son, he just sits there. He gets this tight look on his face. He'll give that awkward little laugh, the one that's too high-pitched. Or he'll suddenly get very interested in his mashed potatoes. Or he'll jump up and say, "Who wants more wine?" He'll do anything to change the subject, anything to pretend he didn't just hear what his wife said to his mother. And every single time he does that, every time he stays silent, he is sending a message. He's picking a side. And he never, ever picks mine. That is the betrayal that hurts more than any of Judith's comments. It's the silence from my own son. It's the loneliness of it, sitting at my own dining room table in the house he grew up in, and being made to feel small and foolish, and having him allow it. So you see, that knot in my stomach, that's what it is. It's not just the dread of what Judith will say. It's the dread of what Jonathan won't do. This is the dilemma, isn't it? I adore my grandchildren. I want to see them. I want them to have these memories. But what is the price? How much disrespect do I have to swallow just to see my own grandkids? How many times can you be the family glue while you're the only one being stepped on? I kept telling myself it was worth it for the kids to keep the peace. But as I stood there in my kitchen, getting ready for this fourth Christmas, I felt that old exhaustion. I was just so tired of the peace I was keeping. It felt more like a surrender, and I was hoping, I was praying that this year, somehow, things would just magically be different. I think back to that very first Christmas. For years ago, I was so excited. Jonathan and Judith had been married about 6 months, and this was their first holiday as a married couple. I was a little nervous, of course, the way you always are. You want your new daughter-in-law to feel welcome. You want her to love your family, to love your traditions. I went all out. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon. The Bing Crosby carols were playing. I had the fireplace going. It was perfect. Judith and Jonathan arrived, and she was carrying a large Pyrex dish covered in foil. "Judith, you're here. Merry Christmas," I said, giving her a hug. "Oh, you didn't need to bring a thing." "Oh, I know," she said, smiling that tight smile of hers. She walked right past me into the kitchen. "It's just my keto-friendly, gluten-free quinoa bake with kale. I just never know what I'll be able to eat at these things, so I like to bring something safe." I just stood there in the hallway for a second. These things, as if my Christmas dinner was a potluck at a gas station. And safe. Was she implying my food was unsafe? I felt that first tiny little sting, but I brushed it off. I smiled and said, "Well, that's very thoughtful. I'm sure it's delicious. Let's find a spot for it." I was determined to be a good mother-in-law. I told myself she was just being careful about her diet. That's what this younger generation is like. It's not a criticism, Raina. I told myself, don't be so sensitive. We all sat down for dinner. The table looked beautiful. I had the good china out, and I brought out the turkey, my beautiful golden brown 20-pound turkey glistening from all the butter, stuffed with my mother's secret cornbread and sage dressing. It was the centerpiece. It was the tradition. I was so proud. I started carving, and the plates went around. "Judith," I said, holding the platter, "a little of the white meat, or do you prefer dark?" She put her hand up, that polite little stop sign. "Oh, no thank you, Raina." She smiled, looking around the table. "I'm trying to avoid, well, all that butter." The table went quiet. I could feel the heat rise in my face. It was one thing to bring her own dish. It was another to announce to the whole family that my food was essentially a heart attack on a plate. But she wasn't done. She turned to my son, who was just about to take a big bite of stuffing. "Jonathan," she said in that sing-song, helpful voice, "you really shouldn't have any more of that. Think of your cholesterol. Your father had high cholesterol, didn't he, Raina?" And there it was. In one sentence, she had insulted my cooking my mother's recipe and was now parenting my 40-year-old son right in front of me, using my dead husband as the reason. I was stunned. I just stared at her. The sharp, hot reply was right there on my lips. That was incredibly rude. Or, I think Jonathan is old enough to decide what he eats. But I looked at the grandkids. I looked at the beautifully set table. And I thought, don't do it, Raina. It's her first Christmas. She's young. She doesn't know any better. Don't be that mother-in-law. Don't make waves. So I swallowed it. I swallowed it all down, and it felt like swallowing glass. I forced a smile. A tight, painful thing. Oh, well, more for us, then. I looked over at Jonathan. I was begging him with my eyes. Please, say something, anything. He wouldn't look at me. He just gave that awful, awkward little laugh. That high-pitched, "has" sound. "Right," he said to his plate. "Right. Well, I guess I'll just have more of this salad. Then," and he pushed his plate away, the plate I had filled for him, and reached for the salad bowl. And that was it. Judith just smiled, as if she'd just done us all a big favor, and started serving herself her quinoa bake. The conversation eventually started up again, but it was all broken. The magic was gone. I just felt cold and foolish. Later that night, when I was washing the dishes, I stood over the sink, just scrubbing that roasting pan. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. She's just health conscious. She was just trying to be helpful. I was the one being sensitive. It was just one remark. It was fine. I wouldn't let it ruin Christmas. I kept telling myself that over and over. It was just one time. It wouldn't become a pattern. I held on to that belief all year, right up until the second Christmas. So, the second Christmas rolled around. All year, I had told myself that the food incident was a one-off, a misunderstanding. I'm a reasonable person. I can give people the benefit of the doubt. I focused on what I love, the grandkids. That year, I had spent the better part of 2 months knitting them new sweaters. I'm not a master knitter, but I'm good. I've been doing it since my own children were babies. I'd picked out the softest wool. I did a little blue one with a cable knit pattern for my grandson and a lovely rose-colored one with little pearl buttons for my granddaughter. I was so excited. I'd even wrapped them in special boxes with big, festive bows. I saved them for the very end of our gift opening on Christmas morning. The floor was a sea of torn wrapping paper. The kids were happy, playing with their new toys. "Oh, I have one last thing," I said, bustling over to the tree. I handed the boxes to the grandkids. "These are from Grandma." They tore them open. My granddaughter, who was 5 at the time, pulled hers out and held it up. "Ooh, it's so soft." I was beaming. I just felt that rush of warmth. This is what Christmas is. I looked over at Judith. She was sitting on the floor next to Jonathan, a cup of coffee in her hand. She had that same tight smile. "They're so rustic, Raina," she said. That word, rustic, it just hung in the air. It didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like something you'd call a log cabin, or a potato. I tried to smile it off. "Well, they'll be warm." "Oh, I'm sure," Judith said, still smiling. She turned to my grandson. "Sweetie, that's your new sweater for when you play in the mud." And just like that, she'd done it again. In one sentence, she'd taken my 2 months of work, my love, my gift, and turned it into a high-end rag. Something to be ruined. My granddaughter looked confused. "Play in the mud." Judith just laughed, a light, airy sound. "Don't worry about it. Sweetie, go play." She turned to Jonathan. "Honey, can you grab those? Let's get them folded and put away so they don't get mixed up with the new clothes." My son, my 41-year-old son, just nodded. "Yep. Thanks, Mom." He took the sweaters from his children, folded them, and handed them to his wife, who put them neatly back in their boxes. I just sat there, frozen. I felt that familiar coldness wash over me, that prickle behind the eyes. This time, it wasn't just my cooking. That was a skill. This was my effort. This was my love. This was a direct line to my heart, and she had just snipped it. I didn't want to cry in front of the children. I didn't want to make a scene on Christmas morning. So I did the only thing I could. I turned away. I got up and started gathering all the wrapping paper, putting it into a big trash bag. "Who wants some hot chocolate?" I said, my voice sounding way too bright, even to my own ears. I kept my back to them. I just focused on the simple task of cleaning up, just breathing. "Just keep the peace, Raina. It's for the grandkids." I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. Later that afternoon, after dinner, I was walking upstairs to get a blanket from the linen closet. The door to the guest room, where Jonathan and Judith were staying, was cracked open. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just walking by. I heard Judith's voice, sharp and annoyed. "I just don't know where she expects them to wear these, John. They're wool. They'll be so scratchy. I already told you I bought them cashmere for Christmas." And then I heard my son, his quiet, agreeable voice. I know. It's just what she does." "Well, she needs to stop doing it," Judith said. "It just makes me look like the bad guy. Just put them in the bottom of the suitcase. We can drop them at Goodwill on the way home. It's fine. She'll never know." I just stood in the hallway, my hand on the doorknob. Goodwill. My 2 months of work. My gift was going to Goodwill. She hadn't even given them a chance. She'd already bought them something better, something more expensive. Something she had chosen. I felt utterly and completely alone. I felt invisible. I turned around, walked back downstairs. I didn't get the blanket. I just went into my kitchen, looked out the window at the cold, gray backyard, and felt my heart just break. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. This was deliberate. And my son was her silent partner. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. But I said nothing. I went back into the living room, sat down, and asked my granddaughter if she wanted to play a game of Go Fish. I was the family glue, and I was starting to crack. After the Goodwill incident, I was cold. That's the only word for it. The sadness of that second, Christmas hardened into something else. It felt like resentment. All year, I replayed that conversation in my head. Just drop them at Goodwill. She'll never know. It made me realize that Judith's problem wasn't just my cooking or my gifts. Her problem was me. I was the old way. I was the tradition she had to erase so she could start her own. And I realized my son was going to let her. So when the third Christmas approached, I wasn't hopeful. I wasn't excited. I was just bracing myself. I felt like someone preparing for a bad storm. You lock the windows, you put sandbags out, and you just hope you can ride it out without the roof caving in. But I still did it. I sent the invitations. I bought the turkey because I'm the family glue. It's what I do. And more than anything, I ached to see my grandkids. If this was the price I had to pay, I'd pay it. It was Christmas Eve. The grandkids were staying the night, and we were doing our biggest tradition, decorating the tree. My ornament box isn't one of those neat, plastic-divided things Judith probably has. It's an old, battered cardboard box that used to hold oranges, and it's a total mess inside. It's a jumble of tinsel and tissue paper, and 40 years of my family's life. To me, it's a treasure chest. I sat on the floor, and the grandkids sat with me, pulling things out. "Grandma, what's this one?" my grandson asked, holding up a lopsided, faded blue clay angel with a piece of macaroni for a mouth. I laughed. "That is your father. He made it in first grade." I pulled out the next one. A little plaster circle with a tiny, faded handprint. And that was your daddy's hand. He was only 2. I pulled out the glass ones, the ones wrapped in fragile, yellowed tissue paper. "These were my mother's," I said, unwrapping a delicate, silver-painted ball from the 1950s. "Be very gentle with these. My tree is not a magazine tree. It does not have a theme. It's not curated. It's just us. Every branch tells a story. Every mismatched, peeling, homemade thing on that tree means something. It's our history." Jonathan and Judith arrived, and we were all in the living room. The kids were excitedly hanging the ornaments they'd unwrapped. I was unwrapping Jonathan's lopsided clay angel. I held it in the palm of my hand, just looking at it. I could still see his little face, so proud, when he brought it home from school. "Look, Jonathan," I said, holding it up. remember this?" He was standing by the fireplace, looking at his phone. He glanced up, gave a quick, distracted smile. "Oh, wow, that old thing." He looked right back down at his screen. Judith wasn't on her phone. She was watching. She was standing with her arms crossed, just watching us like a scientist observing an experiment. "You know, Raina," she said, her voice casual, "my mother has all her ornaments professionally curated. She has a gold and white theme this year. It's stunning." I didn't say anything. I just kept holding the angel. "We should really get you a stylist next year," she continued, "just to help, so it looks a little less cluttered." Cluttered. That word hit me harder than rustic, harder than goodwill. She had looked at my family's history and called it clutter. She had looked at my son's childhood, at my mother's memories, at the physical evidence of 40 years of love, and she had dismissed it as junk. The bitter, angry words were right there. They were scalding at the back of my throat. "How dare you? How dare you stand in my house and call my life clutter?" I wanted to say it. I wanted to shout it. I looked at Jonathan. I stared at the side of his head. "Look up. Look up from that phone. Defend me. Defend your own childhood." He didn't move. He just scrolled. He was hiding. He was right there, 3 feet away, and he was hiding. He had heard her. I knew he had. His shoulders just tensed up a little, but he didn't look up. He didn't say a word. And that's when I finally understood. I was completely, totally alone in this. This wasn't a battle I was losing. It was a battle that had already been lost, and I was the only one who hadn't realized it. My son had made his choice. He chose peace, his peace, and he was willing to buy it with my dignity. I felt the resentment just settle. It settled deep in my bones. It wasn't hot anymore. It was cold and heavy. I didn't smile. I didn't force anything. I just bit back those bitter words, turned away from my son, and hung his lopsided angel on the tree, right at the front. I said, "Let's finish up, kids. It's almost time for hot chocolate." I kept going. I kept the tradition. But the joy was gone. It was just a job. The family glue wasn't glue anymore. It was just an old, brittle, cracked thing that was barely holding on. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the next day. Christmas dinner. The 4th Christmas. I knew deep down I couldn't do this again. This pattern was no longer a pattern. It was a prison. And I knew, as I stared at the ceiling, that the next day, something was going to break for good. And so, we arrived at the 4th Christmas. Last Christmas. I don't know why I did it again. I suppose it's just inertia. You've been doing something your whole life. It's hard to just stop. The glue holds on, even when it's cracked and peeling. The day was tense. That's the only word for it. Dinner was quiet. Judith was civil in that cold, brittle way she has. She didn't insult my cooking. She didn't bring her own food. She just ate it with a blank look on her face, like she was taking medicine. Jonathan tried to fill the silence, talking too loudly about his work, about the weather, about the football game. It was awful. The kids were antsy, sensing the mood, and they asked to be excused to the living room to play with their new toys. I let them. It was just the 3 of us left at the table, surrounded by the wreckage of the meal. The half-eaten turkey, the cooling dishes. "Well," I said, standing up, "who's ready for dessert?" I made my pumpkin pie. It was Harold's favorite. I hadn't made it in a few years, but this year I felt like I needed to. For him. For me. "I'll have some, Mom." Jonathan said, too quickly, "I'm fine. Thanks." Judith said, looking at her phone, "I'll just get the plates." I said, I went into the dining room to the good china cabinet. I didn't reach for the everyday dessert plates. I reached past them, to the back. I pulled out my mother's antique porcelain dessert plates. There are only 6 of them left. They're almost 100 years old. They are paper thin with a little hand-painted violet pattern and a delicate gold rim. And yes, if you look closely, one of them has a tiny hairline chip on the edge. They are not perfect. They are real. They were my mother's and her mother's before that. They were the last special thing I had left to share. I felt a little tremor in my hand as I picked them up. I had a choice. I could use the everyday plates. I could keep the peace. I could avoid the fight. But after 3 years of this, after the clutter comment, I just felt a quiet, stubborn spark. I was not going to let her turn my mother's memory into junk drawer clutter. I was going to use the good plates. I walked back into the kitchen, holding the small stack of porcelain. Judith looked up from her phone. Her eyes landed on the plates in my hand. "Oh, Raina," she said, "that tone, that light sing-song, I'm about to help you tone. No, let's not use those." I stopped. I just stood there, holding the plates. "They're so old and chipped," she said. She actually winced like she was in pain. "It's just depressing. Honestly." She gestured toward the counter, where a package of festive paper plates, left over from the grandkids, was sitting. "We can just use the paper plates from the kids' table. It's not like this is a state dinner." I didn't look at her. I didn't even breathe. I turned my head very slowly and looked at my son. Jonathan was staring at his water glass. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. My eyes were screaming. "This is it, John. This is the moment. After 3 years of silence, this is it." She just called my mother's memory depressing. "Your grandmother. Please, say something." He must have felt my eyes on him. He slowly, so slowly lifted his head. Our eyes locked. I saw it all in his face. I saw the panic. I saw the desperate wish to be anywhere else. He looked at me, and he looked at his wife, who was now just staring at us, arms crossed, waiting. I held his gaze. "Choose," I thought. "Right here. Right now." Jonathan sighed. A long, suffering sigh, as if I was the one putting him through all this. He broke eye contact first. He shrugged. Just a little lift and drop of his shoulders. "She's right, Mom," he said to his plate. "It's just easier. Don't make a fuss. Don't make a fuss." The plates in my hand suddenly felt very light. That cold, heavy resentment that I had been carrying for 2 years, it just evaporated. That feeling of being cracked and brittle, gone. It was replaced by something hard and sharp and perfectly clear. It was the sound of a snap. It was the sound of the glue, the 40 years of glue finally completely letting go. "Don't make a fuss," was what Harold used to say when I'd try to make his birthday special. "Don't make a fuss," was what I told myself when I was up at 5 a.m. on Christmas morning. My entire life had been a fuss. All the traditions, all the effort, all the love, all the work, that was the fuss. That was the whole point. And in 1 second, my son, my kind-hearted, gentle son, had just looked at me and told me that my entire life's work was a meaningless, inconvenient bother. I stood there for a long time. I think they both got uncomfortable. Jonathan kept clearing his throat. I looked down at the beautiful, depressing plates in my hand, and I finally knew exactly what I was going to do. I looked at my son. He had already looked away, back to his plate, relieved that the moment had passed. He thought he'd done it. He thought he'd put out the fire, as usual. He thought his little "don't make a fuss" had worked. Judith had a small, satisfied smirk. She'd won. Again. She'd set the boundary, and Jonathan had enforced it. She was in charge. I felt the trembling in my hands stop. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but it wasn't anger. It was fuel. I set the porcelain plates down on the kitchen counter. Very, very gently. I didn't make a sound. You're right, I said. My voice was so calm, it surprised even me. Jonathan looked up, a wave of relief on his face. See? Thanks, Mom. The paper ones are right there. Just a second, I said. I walked out of the kitchen, past them. They both watched me, confused. I went to the dining room, to the head of the table where my empty water glass sat. I picked up a silver spoon. I walked to stand at the head of the table, and I tapped the glass. Clink, clink, clink. It was a sharp, clear sound. It cut right through the quiet of the house. In the living room, the sound of the kids playing stopped. Jonathan and Judith stared at me. Mom, what are you doing? Jonathan asked, his voice nervous. I'd like to make a toast, I said. My voice was level. It didn't waver. Judith's smirk faded. She looked wary. A toast? Jonathan said. To what? Christmas? In a way, I said. I raised my glass. I'd like to thank my daughter-in-law, Judith. I looked directly at her. Her eyes narrowed. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine uncertainty in her face. For 4 years, I said, Judith has been trying to help me. She's been a model of modern efficiency. She's taught me so much. She taught me that my turkey, my mother's recipe, was just loaded with all that butter. A health hazard. Thank you for that, Judith. Judith's face went pale. Raina, what are you doing? Jonathan was looking back and forth between us. Mom, stop. Don't. I ignored him. I was looking at Judith. I also want to thank you for your honesty about my gifts. All that time I spent knitting, it was such a waste, wasn't it? But you were right. They were rustic. They were scratchy. They were perfect for Goodwill. You saved me so much time in the future. Raina, that's not. I didn't mean. Judith started, her voice losing its edge. No, you were right, I said, still calm. And the tree. I can't forget the tree. I was drowning in clutter for 40 years, and I never even knew it. All those memories, just junk. You were so right. A stylist. That's what I needed. I could see the grandkids now, standing in the doorway to the living room, watching. Their faces were small and confused. Jonathan saw them. Mom, the kids. Stop this. You're making a scene. Making a scene? I said, turning to him. That's the last thing I want. I'm just finishing my toast. And that brings me to my son. I turned my full attention to Jonathan. His face was white. I want to thank my son, Jonathan, I said, for his unwavering support, for his strength of character, for being the man who would sit in silence year after year while his wife called his mother's love trash and his own childhood clutter. Thank you, Jonathan, for your loyalty. That's not fair, he whispered. He looked like he was going to be sick. And finally, I said, raising my glass a little higher, I want to thank you both for tonight. For this intervention, I was about to use my mother's depressing, chipped old plates. I was about to commit the terrible crime of making things special. But you, Jonathan, you gave me the perfect advice. The advice I've needed to hear for 4 years. I looked from him to Judith and back again. You told me, don't make a fuss. I paused. The silence in the house was so total, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. So I'm taking your advice, I said, my voice dropping. I am done making a fuss. This fuss, as you call it, this 40-year fuss I've been making, it's over. I set my glass down on the table. Christmas is over. Judith just stared, her mouth slightly open. Jonathan shook his head. What? Mom, what are you talking about? Just serve the pie. Let's just finish. No, I said. I am finished. This is my house. These are my memories. And I will not spend one more minute of my life having them called clutter and depressing by an insecure, cruel woman and a son who is too much of a coward to defend his own mother. You can't talk to me like that, Judith said, finding her voice. It was shaking. I just did. I said, and now I'm going to tell you something else. I want you to go into the living room, tell your children to put their coats on, and then I want you all to get out of my house. What? Jonathan stood up so fast his chair almost fell over. Mom, it's Christmas. You can't kick us out. Where are we supposed to go? I don't care, I said. You can go to Judith's mother's house. I hear her tree is stunning. Raina, you're being hysterical, Judith said, trying to regain control. You're overreacting. No, I said. I'm underreacted for 4 years. This is me finally reacting just the right amount. You wanted to get rid of my traditions? Congratulations. You did. I pointed to the hallway. Get out. Jonathan looked at me, his eyes wide with panic, and, for the first time, a flicker of anger. You'd kick your own grandkids out. On Christmas? What is wrong with you? What is wrong with me? I said, what is wrong with you? You were willing to let your wife throw my gifts in a Goodwill bag. You were willing to let her call my mother's heirlooms junk. You were willing to let your children watch you disrespect me year after year. Don't you dare try to use your children to guilt me now. This is your choice. You chose her. Now you can leave with her. I stood there at the head of my table in my empty dining room. My hands were shaking. I could feel my heart pounding so hard it hurt my ribs. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, resolute. Judith and Jonathan just stared at me. The shock on their faces was total. This was not in the script. The family glue wasn't supposed to be strong. It was just supposed to be sticky. It was never, ever supposed to snap. I just waited. The silence was the loudest sound I had ever heard. For a second, there was just total, ringing silence. Judith was the first to move. Her face was a mask of pure fury. She grabbed her purse from the counter. You've lost your mind, Raina, she spat. You are a bitter, lonely old woman. Mom, you can't be serious, Jonathan pleaded. His face was crumpled, panicked. It's Christmas. Please, just say you're sorry. We can fix this. I'm not sorry, I said. My voice was quiet. And this isn't something to fix. This is something that just ended. Please get the children. Judith turned and stalked into the living room. I heard her voice, sharp and fake. Kids, coats, we're leaving. Grandma's not feeling well. Jonathan just looked at me, his eyes wide. I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you. I can't believe it took me this long. I said. I heard the kids in the hall. Why are we leaving? I don't want to go. Grandma, what about the pie? I stayed where I was. I couldn't look at them. I just couldn't. That was the part that hurt the most. I heard Jonathan, his voice thick, telling them to hurry. I just stood there at the head of my table and listened to the sounds of my family leaving. The jingle of keys, the front door opening, the cold rush of December air, and then the sound of the front door clicking shut. The silence that came after was a physical thing. It was heavier than any sound I'd ever heard. The adrenaline that had been holding me up, that crystal clear certainty, just vanished, and my legs started to shake. I had to grab the back of the chair to hold myself up. I sank into it, my heart pounding so hard I felt sick. What did I just do? The thought just echoed in the empty house. What did I just do? I just kicked my own son, my grandkids, out of my house. On Christmas, tears, hot and fast, finally came. I put my head in my hands and just broke. It wasn't a cry of victory. It was a cry of grief. I was grieving 4 wasted years. I was grieving the son I thought I had. I was grieving the fact that I had been pushed so far, that this was the only way out. After I don't know how long, I got up. I felt hollowed out. I walked into the kitchen. The pie was still on the counter. The 6 little porcelain plates were still sitting right where I'd left them. I picked one up. I ran my thumb over the little hand-painted violets. My mother's plates. Depressing. I didn't go to bed. I started to clean. I wrapped the turkey. I put the stuffing in a container. I scraped plates into the trash. I did it all, just moving, just trying not to think. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed on the counter. My hand jerked. I thought it was him, but it was a notification from Facebook. My sister-in-law had tagged me in a post. My fingers were trembling as I opened it. It was from Judith. She hadn't even waited 2 hours. It was a picture of her and Jonathan smiling. A selfie, but you could see the kids in their pajamas in the background. The caption read, "Home safe after a trying evening." So sad when elders in the family start to value things more than people. Christmas is about family and forgiveness, not old plates and old grudges. Sending prayers to everyone who has a hardened heart tonight. We're just so #blessed to know what really matters. The hardened heart. The old grudges. She had already rewritten the entire story. I was the crazy old woman who cared more about plates than her own family. I read it twice. The old Raina would have been devastated. The old Raina would have called Jonathan, crying, trying to explain. But I just felt cold. It was exactly what I expected. It was manipulative. It was a lie. And it was proof that I had done the right thing. I didn't comment. I didn't reply. I just went to her profile. I clicked the button. Block. I did it. I felt a small, clean click in my own mind. One half of the problem was gone. My phone rang in my hand almost immediately. This time it was him. Jonathan. I braced myself and answered. "Hello, Jonathan." You. He was so angry. He was sputtering. "You humiliated me. You humiliated my wife. You kicked my children out on Christmas. What is wrong with you?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. There was no sadness in his voice. No confusion. Just pure, hot rage. "You made Judith cry," he shouted, all because of some stupid, chipped plates. I listened. I just stood there in my kitchen, holding the phone, and I listened to my son yell at me. He told me I was bitter. He told me I was selfish. He told me I had ruined the holiday for everyone. And I didn't cry. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. I just let him empty the clip. When he finally paused, catching his breath, the silence stretched out. "Are you finished?" I asked. My voice was perfectly calm. That stopped him. "What?" I said. "Are you finished?" "Mom, you're not even, you owe Judith an apology. You owe me an apology." "I heard everything you said, Jonathan," I said. "You're angry that I embarrassed you. You're angry that I ruined the Christmas you were having. You're angry about the kids. You mentioned the plates." I took a breath. "But you didn't say I was wrong." "Of course you were wrong. You kicked us out." "No, Jonathan," I said, and my voice was finally my own again. It was firm. I didn't ruin Christmas. I just stopped participating in my own humiliation. This wasn't about the plates. It has never been about the plates. This was about 4 years of you sitting there, in silence, while your wife systematically tore me down. This was about you. You're twisting things," he stammered. "I'm not twisting anything," I said. "I'm just done. I'm not going to argue with you. You have my number. When you are ready to have an actual, honest conversation about what has been happening in this family for the last 4 years, you can call me, but I will not be yelled at. and I will not be apologizing for standing up for myself. Mom, you can't just— Goodbye, Jonathan, I said, and I hung up the phone. I put the phone down on the counter. The house was dead quiet. There was no more anger, no more adrenaline, just a vast, hollow silence. I walked through my house. The Christmas tree was still lit, casting a warm glow on all the cluttered ornaments. I touched the little construction paper, Reindeer Jonathan, made in first grade. I went to the kitchen and looked at the stacked dishes, the leftover pie, the 6 porcelain plates. I had done it. I had finally done it. I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't feel like a monster. I just felt tired. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt done. I went to bed. I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, thinking I heard a car door, thinking I heard the front door, thinking he would come back. He didn't. When I woke up, the sun was streaming in. It was Christmas morning. For the first time in 40 years, I was completely alone on Christmas morning. There was number 5 a.m. wake-up call. No rush to get the turkey in. No sounds of little feet on the stairs. The silence was deafening. I lay there for a long time. I waited for the regret to hit me. I waited for that awful sinking feeling of, I've made a terrible mistake. I waited for the urge to pick up the phone and beg him to come back, to say I was sorry, to promise I would just use the paper plates. But it never came. Instead, I just felt quiet. The knot in my stomach, the one that had lived there every holiday season for 4 years, was gone. I was sad. I was grieving. But I wasn't anxious. I wasn't bracing for the next insult. I got out of bed, put on my robe, and went into the kitchen. The mess from last night was still there. It looked like a photograph of a disaster. I looked at the pumpkin pie on the counter, Harold's favorite. I went to the cabinet. I opened it, and I took out one of my mother's depressing porcelain plates, the one with the tiny hairline chip. I made a fresh pot of coffee. I cut a large slice of the pie. I put it on my mother's plate. I sat down at my kitchen table, all by myself in the sunlight, and I ate my breakfast. It was the most delicious thing I have ever tasted. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for them to call and say they understood. I realized, sitting there, that the resolution I was looking for wasn't ever going to come from them. The resolution had to come from me, and it already had. The moment I hung up the phone on my son, the moment I chose my own dignity over his comfort, I was free. The power dynamic was broken. This was my home again, my life, my rules, my happiness, and I was in control of it. For decades, I thought my job was to be the family glue. I thought that meant keeping the peace at all costs. I thought I was being the strong one, the matriarch, by swallowing my own pain to make the holidays nice for everyone else. But I realized the peace I was keeping wasn't real. It was a lie. It was just my silence. My silence was the price of admission for everyone else to have a good time. My question for all of you, the one I've been turning over in my head since that night, is this: was I wrong? Was I wrong to do it so publicly? To say those things in front of everyone? Should I have just kept the peace one more time for the grandkids? Should I have just pulled my son aside later and tried to talk to him again, even though I knew it wouldn't work? Or are there times when keeping the peace is just another way of letting yourself be slowly erased? Have you ever felt like you were the only one doing all the giving, only to be taken for granted? Have you ever had to choose between the role everyone expects you to play and the person you actually are? Please tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I've told you my story, and I truly want to hear yours. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like that family glue, please hit the like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear they're not alone. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll be sharing more stories, and I would be so grateful to have you here. Thank you for listening.